Hey friends, if we haven't met before, I'm a mom of 2 little ones under the age of 3. So I know just how warm and exciting and happy all these moments can be, but also how they can be a little overwhelming at the same time. One thing that's helped me breathe a little easier is having some meals prepped and ready to go. Especially when we get to the witching hour, which if you're a fellow mama, you know exactly what that is. That is from around 4 o'clock to bedtime, when prepped meals ahead just take a little bit of the stress out of dinner time. So today I'm making some cozy and comforting meals to prep for this week, including stuffed shells, biscuits and gravy, apple pie, and a few other things. These are especially helpful for those we're just making it to dinner time, to bedtime moments. I know firsthand what that's like. My husband works sometimes some late hours, and so I'm here doing dinner time and bedtime and everything all by myself with a toddler and a newborn. So it can be stressful, and having meals planned and ready is so helpful. All of that to say, I'm really glad you're here, and if you find this video helpful or just a lightness in your week, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. I would love to answer any questions and connect with all of you, and let's get started making meals for the week. This morning, we are going to make homemade sourdough buttermilk discard biscuits. I know that's a lot of words, but basically just buttermilk biscuits with sourdough in them. And I'm gonna be honest, I have never made homemade biscuits before. I always have used the store-bought out of a can that pop and scare you when you open them. Always have. It's something that has been on my mind and on my conscience over the last couple years, ever since I started to get into more healthy living and like making everything from scratch. So I was at the store the other day buying a can of biscuits, and I read the ingredients and I was like, oh my gosh, this has to be so easy to make. I seriously need to just figure this out, get over my nerves of like messing it up, and just do it. So we are making them this morning because my husband really wanted biscuits and gravy, and the recipe I used, I will try and remember and link it below. If not, I'll just type it out. But it's 2 cups all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon baking powder, a half teaspoon of baking soda, 3/4 teaspoon sea salt, half cup unsalted butter, and you want to make sure that's frozen, and then 1.5 cups of sourdough discard, and half cup of buttermilk. Of course, I do not have buttermilk, so I did a quick Google search, and Google says that you can make buttermilk by pouring 1 cup of regular milk, which we always use whole milk, so that's what I have here, and then adding a tablespoon of lemon juice in it, and then let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes. So that's the first thing I did this morning, so I wanted to make sure that could sit before I needed to add it in with my discard. So if you're like me and you think of recipes at the last minute and you haven't gone to the store recently, well, this is your substitute, so you could still do buttermilk even if you don't have buttermilk in your fridge. Okay, so to make these biscuits, we want to have 2 different bowls. One is going to be all of our dry ingredients, so your flour, your salts, all that stuff. And then we are going to grate the butter, which you want to have this be frozen because the butter staying cold is what helps create the flakiness in your biscuits and the layers. So take a stick out of your freezer and just grate it into the flour bowl. And then your second bowl will be for the sourdough discard and the buttermilk. So we're gonna put all of the sourdough discard, which is about, I only had probably 1.25 cups instead of 1.5 cups. So we're just going with 1.25 cups and it'll be fine. And then half cup of your buttermilk. And mix the sourdough discard and the buttermilk together, either with a whisk or a fork. Mix it really well so it's all incorporated. You don't want still chunks of the sourdough discard that's not incorporated with the milk. It should be a nice liquidy texture by the time you're done stirring it together. Now that we've gotten all of our butter grated, we're going to toss this together with a wooden spoon just to get all the ingredients mixed together and the butter incorporated into the flour. And then we will add our sourdough and buttermilk mixture into this. And I'm using my fork. You could use the wooden spoon, but I think it's so much easier to clean a fork from doughy, sticky dough versus a wooden spoon. So I just am going with my fork. You can use whatever you want. At the end, I did end up using my hands at the very end just to like get all of the flour and everything incorporated. So you can use your hands too if you would like. I'm gonna flour my countertop and we'll dump out the dough. So we want to use a rolling pin and also make sure to flour that because otherwise your biscuit dough will stick. Mine did a little bit, but not too much. So just make sure to always be adding flour when it looks a little sticky. It's not, I mean, you can over flour it, so don't go crazy on the flour, but like it'll be fine. You're not going to ruin your biscuits, I promise, if you add extra flour over top so it doesn't stick. So we're gonna roll this out and you want it to be about a 1/2 inch thick. And then I don't have a specific cutter, like a biscuit cutter, you know, like cookie cutter biscuit, but for biscuits. So I am just using a glass, just kind of seeing like which glass out of my cupboard would work best and going with that. And I will say, don't spin. When I was doing some research on biscuits, you don't want to spin your cutter because then that can close or seal the edges and then they will not rise as well as they should because the edges are sealed. So you want to just push down, no spinning back and forth, just push and then take the biscuit out. And the reason that I folded the dough, so you want to roll it out and then fold it in thirds and then roll it out and then fold it in thirds and do that about 3 or 4 times because that creates the layers. If you were to just roll out your dough and then cut them, you're not going to get the nice tall biscuits that peel apart and they're all layered. So you want to fold it like I did in order to get the nice height and the layers. Once all that is done, we are going to take our baking sheet, spray it. I've got avocado spray, whatever spray you have, or if you want to just line it with actual butter, you can do that too, and set your biscuits in there. Now, I always thought, well, why would you want to put your biscuits so close together? Get a massive sheet pan like I do when I use just the store-bought canned biscuits. But no, if you're making homemade biscuits, you want to have a small pan to where the biscuits can potentially touch each other because them touching each other forces them to grow upwards instead of outwards in like a pancake or something. So make sure you have a smaller sheet tray, or you could do it in like an 8x8 glass dish. Really whatever, just make sure that they are closer to each other. You don't want them super spread out. And then we are going to put these in the oven at 400 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. I did 22 specifically and they turned out fantastic, nice and golden brown. So I would recommend 22 minutes. And then while these are in the oven, we are going to get started on our gravy. This gravy is something that my mom made all the time growing up. So this is my mom's recipe of gravy that she always made us, and then I still use it. I absolutely love it. And it's with the recipe quadrupled, I believe, times 4. Because we have 4 cups of milk, 5 tablespoons butter, 2/3 cup of flour, and salt and pepper to taste. I just dump a bunch of salt and pepper in there. And then 1 pound of sausage. And you want the sausage, typically if you're buying it from the store, it's gonna have like seasonings and flavorings in it. So I'm using a medium sausage. I wouldn't use Italian. You can if you have it, but it's just your biscuits and gravy are gonna taste a little bit more on the Italian side. So I would recommend just doing like a regular sausage. You can do spicy, whatever you guys love. Chop that up, and then once you put that in the gravy, it'll add all the flavor from the sausage in there. So I don't add any other seasonings besides the salt and pepper. All right, so our butter is melted in the saucepan. We're gonna add all of our milk in and just keep whisking. As you add it in, you wanna make sure that the butter and the milk get incorporated. And then we're gonna add our flour and we'll just sprinkle it in. And this as well, you wanna keep whisking and sprinkle a little bit at a time because otherwise your gravy could get lumpy if you're not whisking and breaking up those flour chunks. You could also, I've done this before, it's an extra step, not necessarily, but you could sift your flour beforehand so it's really nice and thin and it gets rid of all those chunks. I didn't here and it turned out just fine. So you don't have to, but you can if you want. And then we'll just add our sausage in here, and really that is good to go. The gravy is the easiest part here. Look how golden and crispy these are. Oh my gosh, I am so happy with my first ever attempt at making biscuits, let alone sourdough biscuits. Wow, these are delicious. And I will say, my husband loves biscuits and gravy, and he loved these biscuits. So I will take that. I mean, I also loved them, and our daughter loved them. She's 2.5, so if she will eat it, I'm happy. But yeah, this is so easy. It is kind of time consuming, so I know the canned ones are way easier. You can just pop them out. And like I've said, I've been using those for years, so no judgment here if you want to keep using the canned ones, but it was something on my heart that I couldn't keep eating those just with knowing all the ingredients in there and that they're just not the best for us. So anyways, now to do all the dishes and enjoy our biscuits and gravy. Next up, we are going to make an apple pie, and then while the apple pie is baking, because that takes about 50 minutes in the oven, I'm gonna make some stuffed shells. So we're talking mozzarella cheese, ricotta cheese, some delicious Italian for the week, and that will be something that we prep and then I cook later this week, and it won't take up any time during the week. All right, so this apple pie I'm really excited about. It's something that earlier in the fall, so right now it's November 2nd, and in October, my family and I went to a apple orchard / pumpkin patch, and we got a bunch of apples, and then my mom and we made apple pie filling and just put them in these freezer bags so then we could take it out and use whenever we wanted. So I took 2 home, my mom kept some, and today I'm gonna make an apple pie because... So I did buy the pie crust from the store. So, I mean, most of this is homemade, but not all of it, and that is what it is. I'm gonna do some I'm taking my fork and making like air holes. I don't really know why, but I know that this is what you're supposed to do with pie crusts. And this, I did buy this from the store, so I've made them homemade before, but I just didn't have time right now to make it homemade, so we just bought it from the store and it'll be fine. And then I am not gonna par bake this, which that means like baking the crust in the oven for a while before adding your fillings. I read the back of the container that the pie crust came in, and it said you don't need to do that, so crossing my fingers that we don't have a soggy bottom at the end of this pie. We shall see. Trusting the instructions that it's telling me the accurate information that I need to know. This is in a bowl because there's a teeny tiny hole in this bag, so I'm gonna try and open this, or maybe I'll just cut a hole and then I'll do that, I'll cut. I never remember where I put my scissors because our toddler, she's almost 3. She'll be 3 in like 6 months, so I guess 2.5. Anyways, she's now wanting to use scissors and gets them out when we don't see her. So I like hide them up high and put them away. And then I always have to remember where I put them when I go to look for them. If you are a mom of a toddler, you probably understand. It's like, I try, and be like, okay, let's, safely learn how to walk with these. Always point them down, but our oven's done. But toddlers, I think I need to drain this. A lot of liquid that just fell out of there. Don't think I'm supposed to put that in my pie. I don't think so. I think that's the stuff from it. I don't think I want that much liquid. So I'm gonna drain this. I think it's like some of the frozen stuff, and apples have excess moisture. So I'm gonna drain that real quick. Okay, so this is looking way better. Anyways, what I was saying is you can tell a toddler something and then they literally forget it like 5 seconds later. So it's just been easier for us to hide the scissors, and we will reassess the whole scissor thing when she's like 4 or 5, And I decided just to do a crumble topping because honestly, I like a crumble topping more than I do the typical pie crust topping. So that's what we're doing. And it's really easy. It's just flour, brown sugar, butter, and then cinnamon. And you just mix that together and then sprinkle it all over the top. So this is the same as if you were doing like an apple crisp or another type of crisp. Can't think of it, but you know what I mean. Okay, and I'm gonna put our pie in the oven for 50 minutes. Okay, so while our pie is in the oven, I'm gonna go ahead and work on our Italian stuffed shells. Don't really have an official name for this, but just stuffed shells. So I'm gonna get these boiling and then we'll get that all put together. If you are new to my channel, you may not know, but I'm currently postpartum. I had our second baby boy 3 months ago, which is crazy to think that's been 3 months already, but it has. Time goes so fast. Just want to say, like, if you're watching this pregnant or maybe you're postpartum and you're like, wow, how in the heck is she finding time to cook all of this stuff? One, my kids are at my in-laws right now. I'm 3 months postpartum, and let me tell you, I did not start cooking homemade stuff or anything until probably a couple weeks ago, because it's just been that crazy and that much sleep deprivation. And that's why I love that I meal prepped and planned so much while I was pregnant. So then the first 2 months of postpartum, I really didn't have to do much cooking if I didn't want to. So also, if you haven't seen my videos on prepping for postpartum, I have lots of them. I did so many before I had our son, and I'll link a couple of them here or down below, but definitely check those out. I have a full postpartum meal prepping guide as well. So like, I want to help people know that prepping for postpartum is such a good idea. Even when you're pregnant and you're exhausted, still do it. And don't think that just because I'm here making all this food and stuff that like you should feel bad for not making all your food, because it takes a while. It takes a while. And that's why I enjoy filming content. This is my first time back, like filming content again in the 3 months, and like it is just filling my cup up. So y'all probably don't really care about that, but it's just nice to kind of semi feel like myself again. So I'm an oversharer, what can I say? Okay, so I think I did about 16 shells. So I've got about 1.5 cups of cottage cheese, cup, maybe a little more of mozzarella, and then 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese grated. And we will stir that up. And then I'm gonna add a bunch of seasonings in there as well. I was looking at some recipes online, and I was kind of shocked by how they were just saying to use the cheeses, and no one was like, add oregano, add Italian seasoning, add parsley, add salt and pepper. So I'm gonna add seasonings because I like my food to have lots of flavor. And then I'm just putting a layer of marinara sauce on the bottom of my pan. Okay, I've also got onion powder and garlic powder here, and then I'm gonna grab some basil. And I don't measure these, I say the more the better, so probably 1.5 teaspoons of the garlic and the onion powder, and then a couple tablespoons of all the Italian seasonings. So I've got oregano, parsley, thyme, and then basil. And these noodles, the box says to cook them for 12 minutes. I only cooked them for 9 because we're gonna be baking this in the oven again, so I didn't want them to be overdone. Just FYI, be aware of that if you're making like a baked pasta dish. And I like to prioritize protein for all of our meals, so I have probably about 1/2 pound of already browned ground beef. So I'm gonna sprinkle that over the top, and then we'll just kind of eat it in the red sauce and with our stuffed noodles while we do that. You could have probably mixed it in with the cheese sauce, that would be fine too. And that's also the reason I used cottage cheese instead of ricotta cheese, is because it has the extra protein. So you could also use ricotta cheese if you would like. It just depends on what you want to do. All right, and then I'm just gonna put the lid on this, and then we'll make it here in a couple days. I'll store it in my fridge, obviously, until we're ready to eat it. All right, our apple pie is done, and does it smell good? Yesterday I was going through our deep freeze because I'm looking for what meats do we have before I go to the grocery store, and we have a lot of beef arm roast. So I decided to look up a recipe that was different than just your traditional beef pot roast, and I found this slow cooker Korean beef recipe. I'll link it below, but I'm gonna make that today and just let it cook in the crock pot all day until we need to eat it. I basically went off this recipe. Besides, I substituted honey instead of brown sugar, and I seared the meat beforehand in the pan in our cast iron skillet with about a tablespoon of butter, and that just really makes your food more flavorful versus just throwing it straight into the crock pot by itself. I also did not cut my beef into pieces. The recipe that I'm going to link says to cut it up into inch long cubes. I did not do that. We just cooked it all day and then shredded it like you would a pulled pork once it was done cooking. So either way is fine. I just found it easier to not cut it up, sear it, throw it in there, and then shred it up later. This was honestly so delicious. My husband and I said multiple times while we were eating it how amazing it tasted, and I'm probably gonna go to doing a sort of Korean beef. Maybe I'll change up some of the flavors every once in a while instead of just doing the traditional beef pot roast with the carrots and celery and stuff. This was just so good, and it's nice to have a little bit of diversity. So we definitely loved this one. The next meal I made for the week was a chicken pot pie, and I am repurposing the leftover biscuits that we had on Sunday, and I'm gonna do kind of like a reverse chicken pot pie where I put the creamy stuff in the pan first and then put the biscuits over top. Never done it that way, but I feel like it should still work just fine. So we're gonna experiment and see how it goes. I didn't really follow any specific recipe for this chicken pot pie, but I will type out below what I did. As long as you have the basics and you make a roux with flour to thicken it up, you're good. So I did about 1.5 pounds of chicken thighs, and since those are like way cheaper than chicken breasts right now, I am using chicken thighs for all of our recipes. So I cut that up and cut some of the fat parts off, and then also seasoned it with salt and pepper, oregano, parsley, onion powder, garlic powder, and then I also chopped up an onion, so I'll add that in as well. But a bunch of seasonings on our chicken because we want to have lots of flavor. And then we're going to add that into our Dutch oven, I guess you would call it, but the big stock pot that you make soups and stuff in. Put some oil in there, heat it up, and then we will cook our chicken on both sides. And once you've flipped your chicken on both sides, cooked it, I'm going to remove it from the pan and cut it up on our cutting board. And some of them are still a little pink inside, but they're going to be cooking more in the oven and everything, so I'm not worried about that right now. We're just cutting it up so it's better pieces. And then I've got our onion in the pot, and it's going to saute for a little while with some olive oil. And once that is all cooked, we'll add it back to our pot, or the chicken back to our pot. I used 1.5 cups of chicken stock and 1 cup of heavy whipping cream for our liquid components. And then once those were stirred and incorporated, I added 3 tablespoons of flour. And again, I just used a large spoon. It's not an actual tablespoon, but I just did 3 spoonfuls. And typically the larger spoons in your set are going to be a tablespoon, and then the regular spoons are a teaspoon. You can use a regular tablespoon if you'd like, if that makes you feel more comfortable. But I did 3 tablespoons, and then we're just going to stir that together really well because you don't want clumps of flour in your chicken pot pie mixture. So make sure to really stir that. You can use a whisk if you're more comfortable with the whisk. And I am going the easy way with this. I bought a bag of frozen mixed peas and carrots. So if you want to cut up carrots on your own, go ahead and do that. I'm just using frozen for this one. And I'm gonna measure about 2 cups of carrots and peas into here. And then honestly, it looks like we could probably use a little bit more carrots and the peas. And whoops, did not mean to spill that all over my stovetop. So gotta make sure and clean these up so they don't burn to my stove. Oh goodness, should have probably not tried to do that one-handed. My son has been in a protest of naps lately, so the only way I really get him to sleep is if I'm wearing him. So that's why I'm wearing him and he's sleeping, but unfortunately when I poured the peas and carrots in, he woke up, so that's fun. I think I have plenty of the filling mixture to actually put this in my 9x13 glass dish. I was gonna do the cast iron skillet, but I think that might be too small. So let's pour this in the 9x13 and see how that goes. Okay, that 9x13 pan works perfectly, and I am loving the consistency and thickness of this chicken pot pie filling. It's not too thick and it's not runny soupy either. So this is perfect. And then these biscuits I've had in the freezer. So I just took them out about 10-15 minutes ago. I'm going to cut them in half with our bread knife, and I think it will fit perfectly over this. I think we have just the right amount of biscuits. I am super excited to eat this. I am going to put it in the oven, even though everything's already cooked. I just want it to be nice and warm, including the biscuits being warm and the filling for when we go ahead and eat it. So I am going to start my oven at 350, and then we'll just let it set in there for like 20 minutes to all warm up before we eat it. And now time to do dishes. Dishes are, honestly, I don't mind doing dishes. I get, like, it makes me feel good that, like, a task is done and we have homemade cooked food. So I know a lot of people don't like doing dishes, but I have found that it helps if you immediately wash them right after cooking in them, because then the food doesn't have time to stick onto the pans. So that's one tip that maybe will help you not hate dishes so much.